Okay, so this is a book review of the book Principles by Ray Dalio. Now, how I came across Ray Dalio is that um, he has recently come out with a big article. It's posted on LinkedIn, and it talks about different economic paradigms. Now, what I found fascinating about Ray Dalio, in comparison with, say, other billionaire figures, is that he recognizes that we are going into a paradigm that will be unlike the time we're living in now. And this is in contrast to, say, like Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos, who I believe are so invested in the current status quo that they can't really see what's coming next. For instance, Ray Dalio has publicly said, is capitalism working anymore? He'll also say, is there a united American nation that has common interests and common goals? He said that at the IMF recently. And speaking of Ray Dalio's economic paradigms, these kind of dovetail with, if people who are familiar with Neil Howe's generational paradigms, and he talks about in the fourth turning, they kind of go together. Ray Dalio perhaps approaches it from an economic angle, Neil Howe from like a more sociological angle. That was something I found really interesting. I'd love to hear those two talk if there was ever the chance. So this book is kind of a mixture of, say, like a business book and a life guidance book. He gives some really good kind of tips and just lessons on um, how to approach business and the working world. For instance, one thing I found really interesting was he needs the need to be open-minded yet assertive. I think that that's something that doesn't really come naturally to most people. You'll either have people who are naturally assertive or people who are naturally open-minded, but rarely a person who can do both of those things. And I think probably you have to work to improve yourself in one way or the other. Another really interesting point he made is it kind of breaks down decision making into a process um, in which you have to gather all the information and then you have to act. It sounds simple, but I think we can probably all attest that when faced with like a difficult decision, it's rarely easy. I think that's another thing where many people are good at the gathering information part, many people are good at the acting part. It's a rare person who gathers enough information and then can act on it. That's a rare skill to have. And he kind of details this as a process in the book. And even though I think this is a book that's perhaps worth having the physical copy on hand to go back and reference when you're faced with a situation like that. One thing that he does ask the reader to do throughout the book is define your own principles. I think this is a difficult thing to do. I wish that it was easy, but I don't think it is. And I think defining your own principles is not something. It may be something that takes time, that can only really come with experience, and they may change over time as well. I wish he would have given a little bit more concrete examples, even if his principles are not yours. I will say, Ray Dalio, he kind of comes from a bit of a boomer, maybe kind of hippie point of view, but he's not married to that point of view necessarily being the right one. That's something I find really interesting about him. But that was his background, and he still has a lot of that influence throughout the book. Another thing he goes through is dealing with setbacks in your business, and then that basically everyone can expect that, and that he details a big crash he had in his life, where he was predicting almost like a next Great Depression. It didn't happen. He was his business was almost completely lost. He sold out on his, basically he went all in on this decision. It didn't work out. He was almost ruined. And his example is that taught him humility. And I think that was a really interesting thing, that we almost all will get taught the most important lesson we need to at some point. So overall, I'd rate this book probably the best business book I've ever read. It gives a lot of just detailed examples on how to manage, how to approach decision making, things that, concrete advice that are useful in a business setting, but also just a lot of things that can just approach you, that can help you in your just daily life. And he's a really interesting guy, and very open-minded, yet assertive. So yeah, I really appreciate Ray Dalio. I think he's someone to watch, someone who understands changes, and yeah, generational changes, paradigm changes, and someone we can really listen to, who's experienced yet is open to new information. Almost more so than any other really high profile leader we have at this moment. At least that's the way I see it. Alright, well, I definitely recommend this book. Wish I could explain it better. Thanks for listening. Bye.